I believe so. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for watching this evening's Board of Supervisors business meeting. My name is Brad Getchell, the Lower Paxton Township Manager, and in typical fashion, I'm going to give a brief synopsis of tonight's meeting before we begin. After approving of previous minutes and receiving various comments and reports, under new business, the board will entertain a presentation via telephone by Jay Wanger on general municipal bond market conditions, followed by Tom Smida on Ordinance 20-04, authorizing the township to move forward in the pursuit of the 2020 general obligation bond issue. Next, the board will authorize the execution of a participant release agreement for the police department's K-9 unit. Subsequently, the board will consider action on Resolution 20-15, authorizing the execution of a lease agreement with Santander Municipal Finance for additions to the township's fleet. After this, the board will take action on Ordinance 20-03, amending Chapter 198 of the Codified Ordinances, enacting certain restrictions on the parking of tractor-trailers. Finally, the board will approve of improvement guarantees before taking action on the payment of township and authority bills. At this point, the board members are seated and prepared to conduct business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Getchell. We'll call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Supervisor Zumas. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Let me sing the Star Spangled Banner.
You do not wish to hear me sing. That's not a good thing. Let us move now to the approval of minutes. We have before us two sets of minutes from the 7th of April and the 21st of April. Wow, we're getting pretty close to, we are caught up. Very good. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of April the 7th, 2020 as prepared and circulated, and the minutes of April the 21st, 2020 board minutes as prepared and circulated.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Would like to announce prior to this meeting, the board met in executive session to receive information from staff, and we will be meeting following this meeting to receive additional information from staff. This normally would be the time when we would have public comment on items not on the agenda. Due to the ongoing coronavirus crisis, the municipal building is closed to the public. However, we do remind our residents that our meetings are, as they are now, broadcast live on television. They're also available on YouTube through our website. And if you have any questions or comments or input you would like to have for our meetings, always feel free to contact the municipal building and provide that information to our manager, Mr. Getchell, and or feel free, as always, to contact any member of this board. We're always available to answer your questions and take input. With that, Mr. Getchell, did anybody have any input for tonight?
Not this week, Mr. Chairman.
Hopefully, within the next week or two, Dauphin County will move into the yellow phase and we'll be able to resume having public at our present here physically at our meetings. With that, any board member comments?
Nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening. No. Okay. Well, there is something happening. I'm pleased to report that on Monday, we in fact took delivery of a roof for our bocce ball courts over here in Coons Park. And of course, our Public Works Department has to assemble said roof and get it ready to play, and we need to move into a position where we can have team sports. But hopefully here within the next month or two, we'll have the roof up and we'll be able to begin doing some of those activities. Not yet, though. Not yet. Manager's report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have one item this evening, if I may. As of the 4th of this month, just yesterday, the township's self-response rate, and again, that's the rate at which our township residents are responding themselves, obviously, to the census obligations that they have as individual household owners. And that's through going onto the Census Bureau's website, mailing back the form, or doing the self-reporting via the telephone. And that rate for Lower Paxton Township as of yesterday was 68%, putting us in the top 7 across Dauphin County for such rates. West Hanover carries the distinction of being number 1 in the county. They are at over 70% at this point of self-response. But just to give some context, the 2010 census self-response rate for Lower Paxton Township was 77.3%. So our residents must be reminded to keep filling out those forms and logging on to the Census Bureau's website if you haven't done so yet, because we have some catching up to do to get us to a point that we were at last year. But the good news is that we have been seeing approximately a 5% increase in our self-response rate per week. So we're catching up, and the coronavirus situation has put the Census Bureau's operations behind a bit, but they anticipate things will start to rev up quickly once things are back to normal. So that's just a brief update on the census, and if you have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them.
So it's giving board residents something to do.
It should be, yes.
Mr. Getchell, question. When you're getting the reports indicating it's 68%, do they simply give you a percentage of the numbers? Do they actually give you lists of who has filed in that? Okay, I was thinking that maybe Mr. Murphy, because I know that he's very much involved with that, then would have a listing of those who have not, that they would be able to reach out to those people.
Yeah.
So you don't get any names, contacts, addresses, or anything with it have not yet reported.
They are not releasing that data, although the Census Bureau itself does have that information, because they will be following up in person to those individuals that have not responded. So
the reason for asking is, and this is personal, I had received mine early on. I completed it and returned it, and yet since then I've gotten 4 notifications to do it. So now I'm questioning, did they get it? Did they register it? And have my report been reported in their collection of data, or are they still seeing that I have not reported? So I don't know if there's a way to check on that or not, but I don't know if there are other people such as myself that have gone through that process and yet are still questioning whether in fact it has been received and documented.
I'll follow up with you on that
Okay.
particular point and let you know what's going on. That is an interesting situation.
But I know the census would be very, very careful about releasing the names of who has or who hasn't. People get a little nervous when you talk about that, and even though, one of your neighbors might be on the local commission, local task force to do this, I think they'd probably be reluctant to, release that information locally.
Right, yeah. Like I said, they're not releasing that particular of data sets to municipalities, but they do track that so that they can follow up themselves. But as far as the overall anomaly of people receiving multiple, mailings or whatever, we'll get an answer to that and follow up with you all
Such as
on
myself, there are people who are sitting out there questioning, did they get my data? Did they register it? Is it documented? They keep sending me more information. Does that mean that they have not recorded it, and therefore they're sending more information saying, please do it?
Well, and Mr.
I think that's a
Fissman,
natural question anyone would ask.
yeah, I did not get any, and I know people that had gotten them months prior to me. So we did ours online, and about 3 weeks after we did it online, we got a big packet in the mail from the Census Bureau to refill it out again. So there is a question, if you do it online, if you did it by mail, are they getting it, and why do they keep? That's a lot of money if they keep sending them by mail.
That was exactly my point. Why are they continuing to send additional forms to me? At what cost?
Yeah. And we got a confirmation, when we did it online saying that it was done, but, then a couple weeks later, they ended up sending a big packet out.
Well, I'll be sure to try to get some answers for the board on that.
It might be helpful not only to us, but to the rest of the community.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Getchell?
I have nothing.
Okay. With that, we have old business, and there are no items under old business. So we will move to new business and begin. We have a presentation, and then we're going to need to take action on Ordinance 2020-04. This would be to authorize the incurring of non-electoral debt by the issuance of general obligation bonds, and Mr. Wenger and Mr. Snyder are going to put that into English for us. And so hopefully things will work, and we will begin with Mr. Wenger on the phone.
Yes, if I may, I'll dial them in right now. I didn't get a chance to do that,
Okay,
but
that's fine.
last time it seemed to have gone pretty well, so.
Yes. And while you're doing that, I'll see if I can get the ordinance to come up on the screen. Maybe not. We're sorry, but there's not a web page matching your entry. I don't know if I can do that on here.
Yeah, mine went off too.
Yours went off also?
It's okay. That's going to be hard to read on the
Yeah.
screen. It's
Well,
on the
we-
it's on the
we-
website. You're
We
not
don't have
gonna
any
be able
public present in the room to look at it anyhow, so
to- It is on the website.
it is on the website. Yes, and I would remind those who are watching on television that our agenda and related information, including proposed ordinances and other materials, are always posted on the website, and that is done generally toward the end of the business day on Friday.
And we have our new feature where you can you can submit comments online
Yes,
for each agenda item,
very good.
in addition to the traditional email and phone calls and things like that. And always check out our Facebook page. That should be the first place you go to if you're looking for an answer on social media. I know there's a lot of alternative Lower Paxton related sites, but if you go right to our Facebook page, you can ask questions and get direct answers right from the people who know. So that's a good way to cut right to the chase.
Well, and our new website for residents who haven't had an opportunity, I strongly recommend you go to it. And it's lowerpaxton-pa.gov, and it's all brand new, just a month or two old, and a wealth of information on there about every part of township operations. So, and we are pausing while we try to get Mr. Wenger on the phone. Hopefully he's not out, well, I guess he isn't out having dinner, but
Okay.
maybe he's getting takeout.
Well, okay, I have Mr. Wenger on the line here. I continue to try to call Mr. Snyder, but it's going directly to voicemail. So,
Well, why don't we go with Mr. Wenger, and then we'll see after we've completed our discussion with him, we'll see if we can get Tom on the phone.
sure. Okay, Jay, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Okay.
All
Hi,
right.
Jay.
If you would like, I can summarize the ordinance and walk through a summary of what's transpired and what will transpire, if that helps.
Yes, please.
Okay, so for your consideration this evening is what we call a parameters ordinance, and it's the same form of approval that you've used now for several years, and it merely is a ordinance that sets forth some very general parameters. So you'll see on page 1 a principal amount not to exceed $36,000. We're actually financing a project of approximately $29 million. We expect the bond issue size to be approximately $29 million. But for purposes of getting this through the DUDA approvals, we advertise at a higher amount. So do not be alarmed by the higher than actual project amount. The form is, again, consistent with all the other ordinances you've adopted in the past. I would be happy to run through it. They will be general obligation bonds of the township. with the same agreement with the authority by way of a subsidy agreement whereby the authority then pays rental payments to the township to cover the debt service and the bonds. We're looking at level debt service over 30 years like the other wastewater projects have been done. And the annual debt service will be approximately $1,450,000, give or take a little bit by the time we're done with the financing. Assuming you adopt the ordinance, we will begin the rating process tomorrow. We don't expect any change in the rating, but it is a formal process that we have to go through. That will take us 2 to 3 weeks, at which point we should be ready to market bonds by very early June, with a closing either late in June or early July.
Okay. Mr. Wenger, that is one of the briefest presentations. Thank you. It is rather straightforward. We also have Mr. Weaver here with us.
Questions.
Any questions?
And
Jay.
this was previously discussed.
We use cell phones by the minute.
Yeah. Yes, it was previously discussed, but if board members have questions, please proceed with.
I think I heard
Jay.
Gary.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Jay,
Yes.
can you hear me? Okay. And perhaps this is somewhat premature, but I did hear you say, a 30-year for this payback.
Yes.
Okay. With that payback of the over 30 years, what is the increase that would be absorbed in the debt service each year for Lower Paxton?
With this, with the addition of this project, you're adding about $1,450,000 of annual debt service.
Okay, I wrote that.
principal.
That's per year. When does that commence? Does it commence in next calendar/fiscal year?
It starts, your first payment would be an interest payment in early 2021 with a principal payment later in the year for total debt service of approximately $1,450,000 starting in 2021.
Okay, so in the 2021 budget, we need to include $1,450,000, which includes both principal and interest.
Yes. Now, if you need some relief for 2021, we could defer principal a year or two, so we could reduce the $1,450,000 by as much, almost $500,000. If that helps your budget.
Okay, well, I'm concerned in as much as the situation we find ourselves and what revenues will be coming into the municipality as we go into 2021. And will we suddenly have an extra $1,450,000? So, yes, I would be very much interested. I recognize it is an unknown variable, but nonetheless, it's still a $1,450,000 increase that we'd have to meet.
Mr. Chrisman, if I may, I'm sorry. We're talking about this is authority debt, so it will be authority.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand it's authority. I should have said authority rather than the township. So therefore, I'll rephrase the question then. It's $1,450,000 that has to go into the authority that has to be raised over and above what's currently there. And the question is, in light of the situation and circumstance we have, can we raise $1,450,000? I hear, Jay, what you're saying is to reduce that. In reducing that, I assume that pushes it out more than 30 years.
No, we wouldn't extend it. Well, we could extend the term beyond 30 years if you want. We would just re-amortize that $500,000 of principal the subsequent 29 years. But the increase per year won't be substantial if you take that approach.
And I believe this is budgeted in the authority budget.
Yes.
So it's already.
I'm pulling it up now. There is a rate study that your engineers.
But we haven't
have
adopted the 2021 budget.
It's not legally budgeted. However,
The long-term planning.
the long-term plan, because this is required by the consent agreement, the long-term plan builds this borrowing in, and it's my understanding that even with this, there would not be an increase in sewer rates next year, correct?
Thank you. That was my next
Yeah,
question.
so there was no increase in sewer rates last year, this year, or next year, so we will have 3 years in a row. And so that's good as members of people in our township are struggling with unemployment or reduced hours.
Right.
At least they're not going to be hit with a higher sewer bill heading through 2021.
And if
And
I can,
it's, I'm sorry, and it's, I mean, when you do see sewer rate increases in the past and whatever happens years from now, essentially, we're doing this constantly. We're constantly borrowing money to pay for essentially the reconstruction of the entire township sewer system from beginning to end. And then once we're done, we got to start at the beginning again. Some of it's because of the consent decree we're under, and some of it's just because we're a big township and we have to do it. But when you look at your sewer bill, know that most of it is the infrastructure and things like this that have an interest rate, and we do try to plan long-term so that we can have some years where there's no increase, but it's good for people to know what the borrowing's for and what the rate payment and the rate increases is for. It's rebuilding the entire system and maintaining it.
Yeah, and so just to expand upon the rate question, based on the current estimates and this being what's now called option 2, there's no rate increase projected for 2021. There is a modest rate increase of 3.3% in fiscal year 2022.
okay, if I can ask Mr. Weaver, has this money been earmarked for certain projects, Mr.
Yes.
Weaver? Yeah, please.
A quick summary. So as authority members may recall, and the supervisors, the $29 million is part of a overall $148 million in additional debt we have to take out in the next 15 years to finish the whole consent decree program. So this has been budgeted out for some time, so I don't want the board to get concerned about rates, because we did have GHD give us a rate analysis, and we reviewed it with Jay and Mr. Smida. We'll be presenting that to the authority at the May 26th meeting. Jay had pointed out no rate increase next year. This $29 million is part of the Beaver Creek, Paxton Creek, and Spring Creek projects that are going to be programmed out over the next 3 years. So we normally borrow 3 years at a time because our staff is only big enough to handle $29 million. This is the max that we can handle. But interest rates are favorable, and we're lucky to be able to borrow right now with the interest rates being what they are. Mm-hmm. So no rate increase next year, debt service payment not till next year, Mr. Crispin. So it will be addressed in the authority budget. And just for the payment, I am going to get an AR report from our office manager, but the payments have been coming in pretty steady for the stormwater and the sanitary sewer. I was kind of shocked. I thought we'd see a decrease in payments for this quarterly bill that just went out, but we've processed pretty much regularly what we've done in the past, and I'll confirm that for the authority in the end of May.
Good, good, thank you.
All right?
Coming, Jay okay, I'll go with Jay. Jay, that I understand that 2021, or there would be no increase, or I don't care who, but in 2022, it's a 3.34% increase. Is there any projections beyond 2022?
Yes. Keep in mind that the projections beyond starting in 2023 are going to be largely dependent upon the pace at which you continue with the overall project. The most current estimate we have is another financing sometime around late 2023 or 24. And if that comes to fruition, that's approximately another $30 million. And that would require rate increases starting in 2024 for several years following consecutively of approximately 3 to 3.5%.
Okay, and with that one, I'm coming back. I want to revisit the 1450, which is the projected, and that's level debt service 1450 for the 30 years, or it's a reduced amount that we could handle, less than 1450 within the 30 years, or extend to 30 years beyond that.
Yes, we could extend the term of the debt, and if you'd like to see those options, we can do that. Keep in mind, however, that this parameters ordinance contemplates 30-year level debt. So if you would like to see a different structure, then we probably should defer the approval, because the max debt service schedule has to coincide with the language of the ordinance.
Okay, Jay, then coupled with that, I think I heard you saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in 2023 or 2024 that we'll need to borrow again.
Yes, and right now...
Which means it's going to push, again, the debt service higher, which means then we have to put 1450 plus whatever needs to be satisfied for the new debt service, and then how far does that get pushed out?
Yeah, so the original model was always using level debt for 30-year terms. And so the model that we've been working with, along with your engineers and Bill, is, as Bill had mentioned earlier, financings every 2 to 3 years to keep the project moving, with the understanding that the back end of these projects, and after this project and 2023 or 2024, assuming no changes to the overall project, there would be about $80 million left to finance. So you're working your way well through what was initially a very large and long-term project. You're at least getting to the back side of that. The rate increases, using some fairly conservative interest rate assumptions, again, are in the range of 3 to 3.5%. And assuming another financing in either 2023 or 24, those rate increases follow almost every year for about 10 years.
And keep in mind also that you're also paying off old debt each year as you go along. So
that's correct.
So
Yep.
you're sort of, while you are adding new debt on, you're eliminating old
Right,
debt.
I know we're paying off some former debt service, but
Yeah.
I'd really like to see all that in paper, because all I hear is the verbal. I'd really like to see what's dropping off so that I can see where there is a net change. Not only what's coming this year in 2021 having to pay, but then in 23, 24.
Wasn't all that provided to the authority? I saw a document that had all that.
You will see all that at the May 26th authority meeting when we do the subsidy agreement. When the board does the self-liquidating debt, they'll take that on. And GHD will be here, and I can provide that rate table that shows all the debt going out. But Jay, just to bring the board up to speed, we did look at extending this bond issue debt out between 30 to 40 years, but after talking to Jay and John, because we've already wrapped that, because the board wants to keep level debt, it wasn't advantageous to push out this debt for 40 years because we already wrapped some debt on the back end. But we have a lot of debt that does expire in 2036, 37, and we do have the reserve of $19.5 million that the board has chosen to use to offset rates to pay this debt off over the next 15 to 20 years. And that's why we don't have a rate increase scheduled for next year. So to answer the question about the debt, John and Jay do have this long-term plan with all the debt service built in and keeping that level debt that you want to see.
But the debt service isn't dropping off substantially till 2036, 37.
Correct. That's the target right now. But as we add on this new debt, it will be extended for another, obviously, 10 years till it's all paid off. And then we're going to have an opportunity, if we don't have to start over, as Mr. Judd said, we'll have an opportunity to lower sewer rates substantially.
I'd just like to see that.
Yeah,
we will have it at the authority meeting. Yeah.
Gary, we'll send to Brad a summary of all the current debt and what is currently the plan for prospective debt, and then you'll be able to see both the rate increases and the raw numbers of debt service, as well as principal falling off for existing debt.
Right, because it needs to show. I need to see the impact, which you've already told me is 1450, but I also know that in 23, 24 we're going to increase the debt service again, and we don't have drop off till 36, 37. My overall concern always, and as you know, that's why I always push for level debt service, because that obviously helps the people in this community that I represent, and that's that we don't have hills and valleys, mountains and valleys of taxes that needed to either be collected just to offset the debt service. Whereas when it's level debt service, you know exactly what it's going to be, and it keeps everything to a minimum for the taxpayer.
Ratepayer.
We will have that. We'll have that for you by the end of the week, and will be distributed to all the board members, so that you have it well in advance of the authority meeting on May 26th.
But it does make sense, though, to finance in this way where, and I mean, none of us like the fact that we have these increases virtually every year, although we're getting a 3-year hiatus at the moment. But, you know, we can go through a 3% increase each year, or you could have what you said, Gary, a giant peak where one year you get 9 or 12% because you didn't budget accordingly. So this allows the investment in the infrastructure to continue, not that we have a choice because it's court ordered, but it allows the investment to continue without peaks and valleys. And then we don't end up like the city of Pittsburgh or Harrisburg, where they let things go for 30 or 40 years and now they're looking at billions of dollars to try to redo their infrastructure, which is failing. So
I mean, for me, it's not a case of do it or not do it.
Well, we don't have a choice.
to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get through a process.
Yes.
I just wish I would have been involved and have gotten some of this information before tonight.
Well, I've seen these charts.
Gary,
times
keep in
over
mind
the
this
years.
is consistent with the plan all along. I recognize you don't have the numbers in front of you, but we haven't changed the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, we went through all this last year whenever we did a financing thing, and we had those numbers, and I recall the rate schedule with, you know, what the debt would be, what the payoff would be, what the increases would be.
Unfortunately, I don't remember a year ago.
Oh, well.
Well, I know, but with these kind of numbers and this concept, I just would have appreciated having it in front of me. Sorry.
Well,
Yep, that we'll have it to you. If not tomorrow, it'll be Thursday.
you'll have it prior to the authority meeting.
Absolutely, you'll have it by the end of this week. And if there are any questions, please let us know.
Okay.
I just had one more question, Jay. Can you explain
Sure.
the switch with the 55% and the 45%?
Mrs. Lindsay, you're referring to the underwriters?
Yeah, that they were switching?
Oh, I can explain that.
Okay,
We have two underwriters who have historically done underwriting work for the township. And one has to be a majority, the other has to be a minority.
Right.
Rather than cut one out or cut the other out, since they've both consistently done work for the township and the authority, my thought was, and we had done this when I was with the county, that you can have two underwriters, but one has to be a majority. So on the last bond issue, we had, you know, one be the majority and the other be the minority, and this time around, flip it around, because there's a slight difference in compensation for that. But it's to make sure that the two people who have consistently been with us remain with us. And one of the reasons why I was particularly wanting to have Mr. Bova on the activity the last time was I wanted a fresh set of eyes and another perspective on the deal to make sure that we had more people looking at it and advising us. And I think the more advisors we have working, the better.
okay, because
And
Mr. Bova's
Robin,
been
just
involved
to be
for a
clear,
long time.
To be clear,
Yes,
the ordinance,
yes, he has.
the ordinance only recites RBC as the underwriter, but the bond purchase agreement that RBC is presenting as part of this approval clearly delineates RBC and Benning and Scattergood as the underwriters.
Mr. Bova is Bennington and Scattergood, yes. And last year, Robin, when we did Mr. Bova was the lead on it, and Mr. Verdelli was second. So that keeps them sort of even. Trying not to play favorites.
Okay, so do both need to be named in the document? Because as I read the document, it only has one name.
Right.
I think Mr. Wenger just explained that.
Oh, then I'm
Do you want to
sorry, I missed
repeat
it.
that, Jay?
Yeah, so the ordinance in front of you cites RBC as the underwriter because
Right.
that's the form of the ordinance. The ordinance also approves the bond purchase agreement that RBC has presented, and in that, RBC represents that it's RBC and Benning and Scattergood as the underwriters.
Okay, it's
As a team.
stipulated somewhere.
Yes, yeah, oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. yes.
Okay, I only read one and I was a little concerned.
It only works if it's in writing.
Right. Jay, another
But
question.
Robin, does that answer your question? We're trying to make sure that they both,
Switch, but I was just trying to figure out.
Trying to make it fair.
Right.
trying to make it fair for both of them, yes.
And when did Mr. Videlli come on? Do you remember how many years that's been?
I don't know.
That was last year?
I
Last year?
believe
Just
last year was the
Okay,
first
because I
time
thought it was
RBC's
always
been
Mike,
involved.
and then Videlli came on, so I was curious. Okay.
Yeah, he was part of the original presentation last year, and
I don't
Mike
remember
was
he
not.
was here.
So since he had done work on the original presentation, it was fair to keep him involved the whole way through. But also, we wanted to include Mr. Bova as well, because as you've mentioned, he's the historic person.
Right.
Who's, yes. It was sort of my goal to not have Mr. Bova be cut out of the process. Not to mention the fact he brought an independent view into the picture, which I felt we needed.
It's another set of good eyes to look at because he has the history and background
Precisely.
in Lower
Right.
Paxton Township. I think that's very worthwhile to keep him involved directly.
Absolutely.
Jay, another question. I know that you have to do a review with Moody's. What's your anticipated outcome?
We don't think there will be any change. The interesting points of communities in Dauphin County is Dauphin County, because of its large government employment base, never really has the big booms of other states or other communities, but also never has the big drop-off in employment. So when you look at historical unemployment rates, Dauphin County compared to even the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is somewhere between 1 to 1.5% lower. So we don't think that the rating is in jeopardy in spite of what's going on in the world today. But that's just our opinion. I mean, we'll find out in a couple of weeks.
Right. Okay, and that was my concern because of the pandemic, what impact that will have on Moody's. And,
Yeah, so
coupled with our contiguous municipality that always drags our review of our ratings downward.
Yeah, so the
trying to
good news
camouflage
is this
that
is
nicely,
consistent
right?
with the plan that Moody's has seen for the last several financings. The rate increases haven't changed materially since we've shown them original information. There's nothing startling going on in Lower Paxton Township that would lead us to believe there will be a change in your rating in either direction.
Okay, and again, I'm asking with the pandemic that obviously Moody's has been reviewing others during the month of April, and I'm just wondering if you've had any opportunity to see what is emerging from those meetings.
I think that municipalities that were very stressed relative to their budget and were using fund balance to balance budgets are probably at risk for rating changes downward. You have very strong fund balances both at the authority level and the township level. Again, this is consistent with the plan they have seen. So we're not anticipating a change. I do know that, as a general rule, the rating agencies are looking at the world rather pessimistically right now.
Right. Okay, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical. What happens in the event that our rating drops?
I would put that at a very low percentage, but to answer the question, we would evaluate the merits, the economic merits of purchasing a bond insurance policy to get you back up to AA. As you know, you're AA rated, so we've never had to buy that third-party policy.
Right.
The policy is relatively inexpensive. It might add a couple of basis points to the net cost of the financing, so that would be Plan B.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there is a backup plan in light
Yep.
of what's going on, because I anticipate that it will be lowered, but that's just a theory, and my theory is as good as anyone else's theory.
Well, in this particular case, I hope you're wrong.
I hope you're wrong, that I'm wrong also, Jay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, do we need Mr. Smider, or are we okay with what has been presented?
Unless you have specific questions on the ordinance, I think you're, okay to go ahead and consider it.
Board members, are there any questions that have not been answered?
Yeah, I have another one. Sorry. Jay, I know that we're really looking for 29, even though our document says 36.
Yes.
Make any
It's,
difference?
the document is to ensure that we comply with the state filing procedures and don't have to come back to you for a second approval.
It does.
So we fully expect the financing to be somewhere between 28 and 29 million.
Okay, so it will come back with the corrected number.
Yes. Well, when you get the final bond purchase agreement, it will have precise numbers. The 36 million is just to conform to state law.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
I just scanned 45 pages. Mr. Stein, are you good with this?
Yes. I was able to read it at home.
I figured you did.
And I'm assuming you did more than scan the ordinance? Yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, yes. Okay, so we have the solicitor's stamp of approval. Any additional questions for Mr. Wenger?
Yes, I have one more. If I'd had the opportunity, this would have not taken place.
Well, this is the opportunity, Gary.
And thank you, and I appreciate it. I'm assuming, and I even hate to even ask the question, but I'll ask it anyway. Our swap has nothing to do with what we're doing here.
That is correct.
That's what I want to make sure. Thank
Yep.
you. That's all I need to know.
Anybody else? All right, then I would gather that we are at a point where we can have a motion. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I can't because I'm on my phone.
You're on your phone.
Yeah, but my phone's not.
Oh, I see. You're
I have to bring it back up.
for the purpose of those
Hold on.
who may be watching, he's not talking on his phone. He's trying to access his board information
because I
from
can't-
his phone because his computer is not working properly.
Hold on.
Robin, how are you?
Robin, are you able
Hold
to
on.
make a motion, or?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we
Okay,
adopt
I got
ordinance. You got it? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I will move that we approve ordinance 2020-04, authorizing the incurring of non-electoral debt by the issuance of general obligation bonds as presented by Mr. Wenger and Mr. Getchell as our township manager recommending approval.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And nobody opposed. There you go. Mr. Wenger, all taken care of. And
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you,
Hey,
Jay.
don't forget to do your homework.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on now to item 9B. We need to take action on a participant release agreement with Big Fish Entertainment LLC. Mr. Godshall.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So this agreement essentially acts as a waiver of liability, if you will, for the police department to partake in a training program for its 2 canine officers. The solicitor has reviewed the agreement and staff recommends its approval at this point. And if I may respectfully, your motion should authorize the Director of Public Safety to execute a participant release agreement for the canine unit's involvement in this training program. Not as written, but as I have just mentioned, please. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to give a hand.
Would anybody like to motion what the manager just said?
So moved.
Thank you. Did we get that? Okay, we got that. Is there a second?
Let Shelley get that one.
Second.
Got it. Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, now, item 9C, presentation and action on resolution 2020-15. This to authorize the execution of a lease finance agreement with Santander Municipal Finance for 2020 Ford Explorers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This resolution, as explained, authorizes the township to enter into a lease finance agreement for the purpose of leasing two 2020 Ford Explorers, one being for the police department and one for the Parks and Rec department. The Police Explorer lease will be paid for through the township's recent agreement, the Automobile Theft and Motor Vehicle Insurance Fraud Agreement between the township and the Pennsylvania State Police, and has been included in the 2020 budget. If you remember back to the budget procedure, the state police will be paying for that in full, so that is not coming back on the township general fund. The second Explorer in the lease agreement, being for the Parks and Rec department, was not included in the 2020 budget, but it has become necessary due to the mechanical failure of the 2008 Ford Explorer, which had over 160,000 miles, and it was at a point at which the vehicle was not passing inspection.
Just getting broken in.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's not over 200. What do you want?
While it is actually low mileage, that was one that had been cycled through the police department, used very vigorously in that way, and it had a number of mechanical issues that it would not pass inspection. So, at any rate, the lease payment itself will be covered through the sale of a plethora of surplus junked vehicles that we have sitting out at Public Works facility, and also if any remainder is needed, we do anticipate that it would be able to be funded through the general fund vehicle maintenance line items, but shouldn't be very much after the sale of those junked vehicles. So those are the two vehicles in this agreement, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Getchell, I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the resolution 2015, it simply talks for the acquisition of the 2020 Ford Explorer base AWD, but you're speaking plural, and the plural does not appear in the resolution, so we somehow need to resolve so that it is a correct resolution. I don't know who wants to jump in, but
Well, it's only saying, from the way I took it, it's just one Ford Explorer. But you're saying
it will be
it's
two. Yeah, I mean, the board can make a motion to approve the resolution contingent upon it being edited to reflect the purchase of the two Ford Explorers. But other than that, I think that's all we can.
That's all you need to do. I mean, obviously, it didn't have to be advertised.
just contingent
Correct.
upon.
So it can just be adopted with that amendment of making it plural.
What are we doing with the 08?
That will be sold through the sale of the junked vehicles. That will be one of the many in the lot.
Are you in the market for a vehicle with 160,000 miles on it?
No. Is there two Ford Explorers that are going by the wayside?
No, there'll only be one. There'll only be one Ford Explorer that will be sold, but.
Brad, I just had a question. I thought with the police Ford Explorers, I thought there was an issue with them, and that's why we went to Tahoe. I know this is through the state police, but I thought that we were going to Tahoe's because there was something with the Ford Explorers that the police weren't using them anymore.
Robin, can you hold 1 minute?
Yeah.
Could you repeat that, Robin? I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Okay. I thought that the police weren't going to be using Ford Explorers anymore because there was an issue with them with the police package. So that's why we are choosing to go to Tahoe's downstairs. Am I right? A lot of ours are trading in for Tahoe's.
Yeah,
Okay.
the standard kind of standard, police patrol vehicles and things are moving towards the Tahoe. You are correct. However, this particular vehicle that the police department will be purchasing will not need to be pursuit rated. It's for the auto theft officer, so it will not be in that same line. Additionally, I think a part of the consideration in moving towards the Tahoes was more of a financial one. While the Tahoe is a more expensive vehicle up front, the long-term maintenance of the Tahoe is particularly less than the Ford Explorer, as explained to us by our mechanics. So in moving the entire fleet over to a particular vehicle, the decision was to move towards a Tahoe. But for this particular kind of one-off vehicle, it doesn't
So
need
this
to
will
be a
not
Tahoe.
have the full police package on it
Correct.
then? Okay. Because I knew there was an issue, and I remember reading about that there was an issue with the Ford Explorers with the police package, and that's why everybody was moving towards a different vehicle. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Don't see any. With that, is there a move to, is there a motion on ordinance number?
2015.
Resolution 20.
Pardon me, resolution number 2020-15.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2020-15, authorizing the execution of a finance agreement with Santander Commercial Equipment and Vehicle Finance, Municipal Finance in Lower Paxton Township for the 2020 Ford Explorer Base AWD, contingent upon additional Explorers as identified by Township Manager.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional questions? Hearing none. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That takes us to item 9D. This is action on ordinance 2020-03, amending Chapter 196, Vehicles and Traffic to enact certain restrictions on truck, tractors, and trailers. Mr. Stein.
Yes, this was done with regard to some parking problems that the township was occurring. I believe it, Brad, it was out along Union Deposit Road, wasn't
Correct.
it?
Correct.
So this is an amendment which should take care of that issue. And we don't need a public hearing because, well, there's nobody here to comment.
Oh. Makes it hard to hold a public hearing without the public, right?
It is, yes.
What do we do
Well, you can just proceed to take action on it.
without the hearing?
Yeah, I mean, technically, ordinances that aren't zoning or subdivision and land development don't require public hearings anyway.
Oh.
But it's just a traditional thing that the township has done for as long as I've been affiliated with it.
It's fine, as long as we're not in any violation.
No, you're good.
And we're amending, right, Steve?
Amending,
We're
yes.
amending, right.
Yep.
We're good, and you have to defend that.
And just to elaborate just a little bit, as it talks about, pertaining to tractor trailers, there's just an issue with parking tractor trailers on
Correct.
a stretch of
And
the intersection Union Deposit. So
right.
very isolated problem that we're trying to target here. And it has to do with parking of tractor trailers.
The crux of it makes these regulations effective not just in residential districts, but in all zoning districts that it may be occurring.
Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve ordinance 2020-03, amending Chapter 196, Vehicles and Traffic to enact certain restrictions on truck, tractors, and trailers as presented and recommended by Mr. Getchell.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Nobody opposed? This takes us to subdivision and land development, and then we have improvement guarantees, of which my memory tells me there were 3
There are 3.
items.
Yep.
All of which appear to be rather routine. Are there any questions?
Mr. Getchell, obviously there's none for the new or reduced. Is there any question or any information we need to have with regard to the extension?
No.
Okay.
Nothing out of the ordinary or particularly interesting there.
Okay. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the 3 improvement guarantees, 1 new, 1 extension, and 1 reduction as presented and recommended by Mr. Getchell.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
That takes us to the payment of bills of Lower Paxton Township and the Lower Paxton Township Authority. Madam Treasurer.
Yes, I make a motion that we pay the bills of Lower Paxton Township and Lower Paxton Township Authority.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Announcements. Not a whole lot going on. Any announcements, Mr. Godshall? Okay, with that, our next meeting, we will have a workshop meeting on Tuesday, March 12th. That's 1 week from tonight.
March.
Oh,
I think
May?
that should be May.
May.
see, that's what I get for reading what's in front of me instead of thinking, right? The meeting will be on Tuesday, May 12th at 7 p.m. Right here in this room. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.